Hey guys, before we begin, I just want to say a massive thank you to all the support. Thank you for all the likers, thank you for all the followers, the viewers, subscribers. Special shout out to my first Patreon supporters. I've started uploading my AW3 podcast on there as well for you guys this week. Also a massive shout out to all the new Twitch subscribers and long-time subscribers and people that have also been generous enough to make donations over the last few years. I wouldn't be able to make content like this if it wasn't for your support. So this video and all the other videos are pretty much the result of your kindness, and I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, and big shout out to you all. In today's video, we'll be covering the strongest battleships in Age of Empires 3. With the release of Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition, the United States, African Royals, and Mexico DLC, including all of the previous patches from before, this game has received a gigantic overhaul with a mass of new content and a large amount of new battleships. But how good are these battleships? And most importantly, which is the strongest of them all? In standard Age of Empires 3, the frigate is known to be the strongest late game battleship in this game. The Caravelle, on the other hand, is one of the first ships you can make and is great for smaller early age fights, water raids, or contesting water very early on. The Galleon, for example, is very strong versus coastal defenses and has better resistance versus anti-water structures due to its unit tag, which gives most defensive structures negative multipliers against them, and it usually causes them to do 50% less damage to the Galleons. Lastly, we have the Monitor ship, which is usually stationed in harbour sections and shallow parts of the water. They carry large weaponry and can carry out deadly long-range attacks, which make them best at applying damage from the backline to boats, buildings, artillery from a very far distance. All of these ships have been the pioneers of water play since 2007. They're the most known battleships and are considered by many to be some of the best battleships since this game came out. But with the release of Definitive Edition and all of its additional content, how has that now all changed? For us to now understand all of the newer battleships, first we have to head all the way back in time and take a look at its former competition, the first newly added DLC battleships from the Asian Dynasties and the Native War Chiefs expansions. As a disclaimer, most of these boats mentioned in this video are included in the base game and don't require you to purchase any additional DLC content, but will be mentioned if you do. Our first boat resides in the murky, shallow rivers of central Mexico. It's silent, agile, and feared by every other civilization in this game. It's small and secretive, and almost like it's designed to blend in and camouflage itself while drifting along the murky riverbeds. Despite its size, this boat is surprisingly considered to be one of the best boats in this game, the Talog Canoe from the Aztecs. Aztec players usually like to keep to themselves. They either ignore you for most of the game or come at you with their full strength early on and wipe you from all land and water. But if we take a look back in history, it is stated by many that Aztec weren't really a civilization that took large dominance over the seas. Much different than in this game, Aztec are known by some to be the ruler of water. Their small canoe-type warships are deadly and have incredible strength in numbers. With the Talog Canoe's base stats, it won't win many one-on-one naval battles, but in numbers, fully upgraded, and with their one-of-a-kind native dance, there actually aren't many battleships that can beat the Talog Canoe. Compared to all of the other warchief civilizations like Lakota and Haudenosaunee, Aztec is by far the superior water civilization. Other native civilizations rely on hired mercenary privateers or smaller war canoes in large masses to keep up on water, which are trainable by all native civilizations, by the way. But there are even more things that the native civilizations all have in common. One of them is that the native civilizations are able to garrison their war canoes and ships into the docks, giving the dock extra anti-ship attack and allowing native boats to effectively dodge attacks, similar to the Inca fortress. But despite all of that, there's still one more thing that can take this boat and all of the native civilizations' water play to the next level, which gives them all dominance over most other European civilizations, and that is the community plaza. Civilizations like Lakota can standardly dance with villagers on the community plaza with the siege dance, which give all of their boats and units under their command extra attack damage. Inca and Aztec and Howdy have the water dance ritual that they unlock by sending in a card. Much like the siege dance for Lakota, the water dance is a ritual which also allows them to use villagers and warrior priests to boost the warriors' morale and receive extra hit points as well as attack on their boats. Only a select few civilizations like Inca, Haudenosaunee, and Aztec have this rare ritual, and with the maximum amount of priests and villagers dancing will allow the Aztec ships to have stats that will look something like this, which is absolutely crazy if you think about it. Understandable that many people consider Aztec and other native civilizations to be the best civilizations on water and definitely deserving of a top spot on our list. Next up on our list, we have a battleship that was actually considered to be one of the best one-on-one battleships of all time back in its glory days. There weren't many that could beat it, and if we take a look at its stats, we can see why. The legendary Fluyts. Maybe some of you won't be surprised by this, but China is actually one of the top water civilizations in this game right now. The legendary Chinese Fluyts is stat-wise essentially a very boosted, very expensive frigate at a very high price of 1,200. A trainable Fluyts has 2 less range than a frigate, but much better stats overall and could most certainly beat it in a one-on-one fight. But their naval strength does not stop there. There's one more ship in the Chinese Navy that deserves an honorable mention. This ship has less range than a caravel, less damage on attacks and broadside than a caravel, and costs the exact same as a caravel, which is kind of terrible, right? It's called a war junk. And at this point, you're probably wondering, has Len already lost his mind not even halfway through this video? Well, hear me out on this one. So if we look at the name of the ship, we can see it says junk, which sadly doesn't refer to it being trash, but it might as well be, because as the Chinese, you can actually set the same ship on fire and start ramming it into buildings, boats, docks, and anything with residence on water. With less HP, but an absolutely insane one-time damage of 500 upon impact, which can be increased through cards. This war junk turns into a warlord on the ocean and just adds to the already incredibly strong navy of China. Slightly unexpected but highly underrated civilization on this list are the Dutch. Although they share a lot of the standard battleships with other European civilizations like frigates, monitors, and so on, which without cards all have the same stats, the Dutch do however have one ship that is completely unique to them and extremely underrated, and those are the Fluyts. The Fluit had a significant role in the 17th century for the Dutch. It is said that this ship was designed to be a very cost-effective cargo ship, which enhanced the Dutch's international trade greatly. The Fluyt's design is kind of similar to a galleon, but think H2 Lefidinites but on water. The Fluyts have slightly less damage compared to a caravel, but they make up for it with their large HP pool and the same range resist as a frigate, all in H2, which make these bad boys almost unkillable when tanking damage and fighting versus H2 water defensive buildings and ships. It's important to mention that the Fluyts and galleons have the siege tag in their unit description, which give a lot of coastal defense negative multipliers against them, meaning that they do half damage. But the Fluyts with their resistance and extremely high HP pool take it all to another level. As we make our way to the next civilization on the list, it starts to get a little unfamiliar. One of the newest additions to this game made its appearance with the African Royals DLC. Ethiopia was released last year, and with it came a variety of new battleships. But how good are these battleships? It seems like many people know a few things about Hauser and Ethiopia, but there's a lot left to be discovered. Let's find out. The first ship Ethiopia can make is called the Battle Canoe, which actually looks more like a party boat on Venetia. Stat-wise and cost-wise, though confusing, can accurately be compared to other H2 ships. If compared to a caravel, the Battle Canoe has 13 range attack times 5, so 65 damage with slightly faster rate of fire. However, it also has less range and no special ability like broadside attack, while having the same total resource cost. The Battle Canoe is more coin heavier though, so therefore slightly more efficient to train, and if we face the caravel off versus the Battle Canoe, it's surprisingly balanced if we're talking base ship stats. So what else do Ethiopia have? The next trainable ship from Ethiopia is the cannon boat. It already looks a lot more intimidating and is essentially a distant relative of the monitor ship. It's great at sniping stuff from long range and doing impeccable damage upon attack. The cannon boat has less range than a European monitor ship, but therefore gets more health and attack. Much like the monitor ship or the ironclad, it has a special ability which is great for sniping targets from afar, but all of the cannon boat's attacks and special abilities have less area of attack and less range, which doesn't necessarily make the ship bad overall, but quite different. The cannon boat for Ethiopia seems to be more up close and personal, and even has 25% more range resist than its other half, making the cannon boat resilient to taking extra damage in a fleet, but also great at dealing damage, but worse at sniping artillery and structures due to its negative multipliers or non-existing multipliers and less range. There's still one ship that Ethiopia can train actually, and changes their game completely. Sent in with a card and soon after trainable at any dock. This ship is one no one expected the African civilization Ethiopia to have, and I'm very excited to introduce to you all the war dhow. The dhow is traditionally known to be a large Arabic trading vessel favored by many for its great handling and capacity. However, this war dhow has been rigged to be more focused on naval combat rather than trading. If we're talking full package, this ship is pretty much there. Its stats are almost identical to the mighty Chinese Fuchuan. The dhow does more damage, but the Fuchuan has a better broadside attack. So who would win? The Fuchuan definitely meets its maker when facing up against the war dhow. We also have to keep in mind that Ethiopia can send in additional cards that no other civilization have, like Land of the Sea, which allow Ethiopia to garrison their explorers inside their boats and increase its attack by 35% based on a single ras inside of the boat, which if you think about it is actually very crazy. And I think it's safe to say that with Ethiopia, we have definitely acquired a new lord on the ocean. With this battleship and some of their strong naval cards, Ethiopia can be crowned one of the best sea nations in this game right now for sure. Another African DLC civilization that brought something new to the game in terms of water play is Hauser. They also have the party canoes and cannon boats, but instead of the war dhow, they are able to send in and train Zebecs. Zebecs were speedy trading ships that almost exclusively took presence on the Mediterranean Sea. They have a more lengthy designed hull and are faster than the dhow. They were similar to galleys, which replaced the caravel for the Ottoman civilization and also belong to some of the fastest ships in the game. The Zebecs were known to have lesser cannons on board, but the cannons that they did have on board are no joke. The Zebec does a whopping 180 damage with a slower rate of fire and 300 HP less. In terms of overall strength, they're well matched and balanced versus other competitors. Typically, whoever gets the first shot off wins, making the Zebecs one of the strongest ships in this game and also taking Hauser to the top of our list of today's video. All in all, I think it's safe to say the African civilizations take their place alongside some of the better water civilizations in this game. They bring some much needed competition and variety on water and can even challenge the tyrants on water like some of the native civilizations, or maybe even one of our next civilizations. Earlier we talked about Aztec being considered the ultimate ruler of the seas in the very late game with all of their upgrades and water dancing, but there might just be one civilization that can rule over even them, making its appearance as one of the first new civilizations in the definitive edition. Inca has been terrorizing players on land and water since the release days and are easily one of the most hated civilizations in the game right now. Inca is hated so much for their strength that they actually had to be nerfed so hard that only a select few people can play them now. And now Inca kind of feels like the abandoned ruins of a once thriving capital. However, all is not lost. Some of their former strength can still be seen and felt. In terms of navy, as Inca, you can only train a single warship from your dock in Age 2. It's called the Chincha Raft, and you can kind of imagine how good that raft would need to be in order to be viable in all ages. And indeed, the Chincha Raft has great stats for its cost. It has more range, more damage, more speed, more rate of fire, more range resist, but less HP and slightly less speed, all at a very affordable cost. If the Talog Canoe was a heavyweight champion among the rafts and canoes, the Chincha Raft wouldn't be far off. Inca waters like Age 4 Aztec water dominance, but instead of needing to be in Age 4 with Inca, you can pretty much already start absolutely destroying anyone in Age 2 and beyond with the Chincha Rafts, which is why many people consider Inca to be overpowered on water. There's a reason why they held rank 1 for being the best water civilization in the new age of Age of Empires 3 for so long. Next up, Japan. The design of the Japanese battleships are like no other. They're effectively built with their late game battleships having heavy armor plating. The weakest attack ship they have is a caravel type ship called Fune, which base stats resemble the caravel's base stats. They attack faster than caravels with less damage, which also means less overkill, but therefore also have a weaker broadside attack. They receive most of their glory when reaching their potential either through Japan's many naval cards, technologies, and more, and they even get bonus damage if they're in range of one of their daimyos, which makes all Japanese ships extremely cost effective. Their galleons, also known as Atakabuin, look magnificent. They have less damage and range, but a lot more HP, but with less movement speed than your European average galleon. But they also cost 100 resources less than your average galleon, and they also kind of remind you of the Dutch Fluit, which make them great at tanking damage for stronger, higher DPS ships in the fleet. But if the attack gabuin is faced up against the galleon in a one-on-one naval fight, the galleon will kill the attack gabuin just slightly over 2 volleys faster, which is quite a lot of extra damage, which kind of shows you that this ship is specifically designed to be a tanking force in a fleet rather than a damage dealer, so ideal for team games. The ultimate battleship that they can train is called the Tekozen and starts off pretty average. It's got slightly worse stats than a frigate, which make it lose to the frigate, but again, it's designed to be cost effective and considerate to the Japanese civilization design and the battleship scaling through bonus cards and auras, which some other civilizations do not even have. All in all, if we take a look at Japan's Navy's base stats, they actually seem kind of average, but if you've ever played against Japan and you know about Japan's civilization design and consider the potential these ships can have with their cards and so on and so forth, it actually starts to turn things around, making Japan look like a very decent water civilization in this game. Another civilization added to this game are the United States of America. Released with the USA DLC, USA has had its fair shares of ups and downs. When this civilization first released, it was so differently designed to anything anyone had ever seen in Age of Empires 3, and when it comes to their navy, it's very much the same. Their navy combat starts off with the sloops, which are some of the first ships they can train. They have high damage with less attack speed and are very well matched versus the caravels. But after many experiments, I feel like the sloops are actually slightly favored in this matchup, but only because the sloop actually has an advantage at getting the first shot off faster due to its extra 2 range, and its built-in broadside attack is a charged ability, whereas with the caravel it's a targeted ability which requires you to click it, which can therefore cause delays, potentially giving the sloop an extra few seconds of advantage to sink the caravel faster. It's an already great start here for USA. Another ship that the United States also have are the steamers, which can become the fastest ships in the game temporarily. With its full steam ability, it receives a 40% speed increase with a 90-second cooldown. It has 2 less range but 200 HP more than your average galleon. And although it's quite expensive for a galleon, it comes with even more additional features like the ability to fish, which most galleons cannot do. Or another feature that the steamers have is the ability to place docks all around the shore. But essentially at first, in competitive supremacy 1 versus 1 gameplay, you're kind of paying more for pretty much the same thing. And one of their last ships that the USA can make is the mighty steam ironclad. It is said that the first launch ironclad was from the French Navy in 1859, and following the American Civil War shortly took presence in many naval battles, quickly replacing some of the strong sailing ships known at the time. The ironclad has a thick armor plating similar to the Tekozen, which a lot of ships did not have at the time, making it very resilient to other attacks and being able to exploit the unprotected wooden hull of its competitors. Ironclads were designed for several roles. Apparently they were commonly used for high sea naval battles, or as coastal defensive ships, or of course as long-range cruisers, similar to its predecessor or distant relative, the Monitor ship. The ironclad and its future development was known to have made a lot of previous sailing ships obsolete due to its advanced and effective design. In this game, it absolutely destroys the Monitor ship and does very well versus the frigate, but gets destroyed by the legendary Fuchuan and the War Dao, which actually indicates that the ship is better used in the backline and as a long-range cruiser. Before we move on, I quickly want to add that Mexico was another DLC civilization added to this game, and their navy is pretty much identical to the USA Navy, just like among most of the other civilizations not officially mentioned on this list. Yet one of those civilizations to receive an honorable mention, however, is Spain. At first you might be thinking, how is Spain any different to any of these other European civilizations? They have the frigate, monitor ship, caravel, and the galleon, like many of these civilizations, with almost no differences. But one thing they do have is a unique card that improves their galleon's attack by 30%, with even more additional cards later on, which gives them the strongest galleons in this game and make the galleon ship for the Spanish pretty much unkillable in the mid-game. They can tear down naval defenses with their strong resistances, and now with their extra attack damage, they can destroy other ships with their boosted attack damage that can even be additionally boosted with their missionaries affected by the unction card, which give them even more bonus damage when in range, similar to Japan with its daimyos, taking the Spanish fleet from being pretty average to being actually one of the top civilizations on water in this game. Another honorable mention are the Ottoman galleys, which replaced the caravels for the Ottoman civilization and are the fastest caravels in the game, but other than that, overall they have the same strength as other caravel type ships. So far we've covered pretty much every ship worth covering in this game. Of course, there are exceptions like the Wako mercenary ships for the Asian civilizations, or for example the rafts, or the Inca fishing boats with the water dance and their armed fishermen card, or for example the native canoes for European civilizations, which are very strong when combined with cannon fire boats. But overall, everything you need to know about a ship's total strength has been mentioned in this video. But there still is one ship from one civilization that we haven't mentioned yet. It was added to this game not even 2 weeks ago. I don't really know how to say this gently, but if you're thinking of using any previous strong naval combat civilization mentioned by me in this video, you might just have to reconsider after seeing what I'm about to show you. Because as our final mentioned civilization with the current strongest battleship and navy cards in this game, we have, of course, the British Empire. The selection of ships are pretty much identical to most of the European civilizations. However, their vast card selection makes them far better than all of them. And in H4, they get access to the Royal Battleship, aka the Royal George. This is the largest and strongest battleship in this game by far. It has 42 cannons, including 4 at the rear and 2 at the front, with on-deck hand mortars and swivel guns. The Royal Battleship is a menace and can only be sent in with a card. It can be sent in infinite amount of times for 1000 coin, and the first time you send it in with the British, it's free. It has a total value of 2250 coin, making it the most expensive ship of all time, and with its 4.75 movement speed, also one of the slowest. It has a base HP pool of 4500 and does 45 range attack. 45 range attack is almost the same damage as a Japanese Fune, but it's 45 range attack at 0.50 rate of fire, which is insane. That's like 18 Funes shooting at you 2 at a time on one side non-stop. And when you add to the fact that the British have the most naval upgrades in this game, this ship is literally unbeatable. It kills Futrans, ironclads, and it can even kill 2 frigates at the same time with no broadside attack, and eats corverins for breakfast. And by the way, corverins have a 10 times multiplier against ships. They're supposed to counter ships, but not when it comes to the Royal British Battleship. The British Battleship is without a doubt the new king of the ocean, and I think it will be for a long time coming. We do have a new civilization coming in Age of Empires 3, so it will be interesting to see if it will be able to produce a ship that can beat this battleship, but right now, Royal George is the last battleship on the list and also the strongest battleship in this game so far. So guys and girls, I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to say a big thank you to all of the supporters on Patreon. I'll also be uploading all of the games people sent to me to cast on Patreon, and even some extra additional games like Kaiser Clan games and so on. So if you want to check me out on Patreon, it's definitely worth it. And if you're actually the player in the game, just send me a message on Discord and I'll send you the link. But it's also a good idea to subscribe to my Patreon, because not only will I cast your games, but I'll also be uploading additional content like podcasts, Kaiser Clan games, professional games, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty much a win-win situation. Anyways guys, thank you so much for all your support on the previous videos. Sorry for the long wait on this video, as you know it takes some time to make these. I also want to give a big shout out to Gimmick AOE, and I'm gonna link his stream in the description box below. He's been helping me out so much with these videos, and if you've been enjoying this content a lot recently, then you also have Gimmick AOE to thank. So stop by to his stream and just say a massive thank you for the content that he helps provide. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.